So yeah, this is there's a few people on who were at the Southern Dharma retreat. We're all still, nobody's had to go anywhere. It's been very convenient as far as that goes. But it's the first time that I've been part of teaching an online retreat, and it really went remarkably well. And we're going to do it again in a few weeks. And it was, the way we designed it was there was an early morning sit that was just silent, and then after breakfast or whatever time of day it was for you, we had a guided meditation and a Q&A, and then there was an open space for people to just work on their own. So Zoom goes off. And during that time, there would be small group meetings. So everybody got to be in a group of, I think, 5 or 6, meeting with the teacher. And you would meet with the teacher twice during the retreat in a small group. And then the afternoon, there would be another guided sit and a Dharma talk, and then again an open space for what we call individual practice. And then in the evening, there was a guided loving kindness meditation with a talk around that topic, and then a meeting, a 12-step style meeting. So the structure seemed to work out well. It felt about right. Yeah. Thumbs up from Angela. Thank you. Angela was on board. Oh yeah, there's Jordan too. Wow, Chris. Yeah, this is practically a reunion. And I'm glad people came today, because it is sort of nice after being on retreat to be able to check in and to just be back together. And we don't usually get to do that after a retreat. We kind of disperse, and then, you might stay in touch with one person, but and my topic for today is the 5 precepts, which I didn't get to talk about on the retreat. So I'm actually very sort of I don't like to say excited sometimes about teaching Dharma, because it's not quite the energy, but I'm feeling very engaged and inspired by this topic as I've been reflecting on it this morning. But let's begin with some meditation. I lost the striker for a moment. Okay. So just sitting back and just getting into a comfortable meditation posture again. And if you were part of the retreat, hopefully you're feeling a little of the momentum of having that much practice under your belt for a few days. And in any case, just bringing the attention into the body, feeling how you're holding your body. Is that comfortable? Is that easeful? Oh, our practice is so much about balance and kind of middle way. And this is embodied in the way we hold ourselves. That we're upright, that our chest is open, our belly is soft so the breath can move into the body. But even in that upright posture, there's a sense of softness or release. So that's the balance. We don't want to become rigid, but we also don't want to be flaccid, just drooping. And this balance applies in the same way to the effort we make to be present. Or to be with the breath, to be mindful of the breath. If we are rigid in that way, trying to hold on to the breath, then there's just a tension. And that tension really limits clarity. But at the same time, if we just take an attitude of kind of kicking back and just hanging out, then there is no true mindfulness. This middle way, this balance, is not even in itself a place to arrive at. There is no spot that's right in the middle. Like the tightrope walker who is constantly correcting first one way, then the other. We have to balance and keep balancing our effort as well as our body in very subtle ways. So just bringing the attention to the breath. Letting the body settle. Letting the attention gather around the breath. If you've been practicing for some time, you probably have a particular place where you like to follow the breath, either the nostrils or the belly or somewhere else, chest, perhaps. There's no best place for this, just wherever it feels natural and easy to connect with the sensations. And then there's a way in which we can really feel intimate with the breath. as though there's a kind of massaging happening. This beautiful touch. So although the breath is fundamentally a neutral experience, as we become more connected with it, it can incline towards a pleasant sensation. One Buddhist monk calls it the beautiful breath. And this isn't meant to be theoretical or some image we create glorifying the breath, but actually the direct felt experience of its beauty. And again, not to create a great proliferation of thought, but it can help our engagement to recognize the remarkable interaction that's evolved on this planet between the atmosphere and our body. And our body has learned to take what it needs from the atmosphere, that the atmosphere itself is made up of these elements which allow for life. And we are the really recipients of that. Certainly not something we can remember earning. Certainly a gift, this life. Where's your attention right now? Just keep bringing it back gently, kindly, relaxing and releasing. All right. A couple of little announcements before talk. One is I'm not supposed to promote this, but they didn't say I couldn't mention it to people. That my book, One Breath at a Time, is going to be a Kindle daily deal for $1.99 on the September 17th on Amazon. So if you don't have it on Kindle and you want it on Kindle and you'd like to save money, that's a pretty good deal. And my publisher told me that, and they say that they arranged it. So I guess that's a good thing. Giving, anyway, I'm sure many of us have conflicting relationships with Amazon, but as an author, they do support me in various ways. Well, in one direct way, they sell my books. Although I do try to do most of my purchasing out of my local bookstore. Anyway, advertising. The other thing is that this Friday, instead of being on this Zoom link, we will be on the Spirit Rock Zoom link, which is, I also have a link to it on my website, but that's once a month. On the second Friday, we go over to Spirit Rock. So same couch, different Zoom link. Although there is talk of getting a new couch here, so one never knows. Things keep changing. So I also wanted to mention that I invited people who were on the retreat to come this morning and to hang out afterwards. So at 11, I'm gonna thanks, Chris. I'm gonna ask people who weren't on the retreat to log off so that I can have a little meeting with the retreat attendees. So, okay, one breath at a time, Buddhism and the 12 steps. We are on step 4 and have been for months now, I think. But it's just, really even more than when I wrote the book. It's becoming really, I feel, an opportunity to explore Dharma in a way that I'm really enjoying. So we did finally get through the hindrances, though. So, woohoo! So proud of ourselves for that accomplishment, right? But that brings us to the precepts, and I'm not sure how much time we'll spend on the precepts. It might go beyond today because there's some different takes on them. But once again, for people who were on the retreat, the Bhikkhu Bodhi's book, The Noble Eightfold Path, is an incredible reference for this. And I actually have to say, this book is 120 some pages. I have not read this entire book because every time I start to read it, something strikes me, and it just like blossoms. So much goes off in my head that I can't just keep reading on. And to a great extent, I use it as a reference. So for anybody who is teaching or thinking about teaching Buddhism or meditation, it's an incredible reference. And as I say, oftentimes you can read a paragraph and it gives you all you need for kind of the basis for a talk. They ought to use it in the MMTCP. I think that'll be my next recommendation to them. Okay. So interestingly, though, for the Noble Eightfold Path, Bhikkhu Bodhi puts the 3 sila elements into one chapter. So sila is, well, here, I'll see if I can, here's what Bhikkhu Bodhi says about sila. The Pali word, and Pali is the language of the early Buddhist scriptures. The Pali word we have been translating as moral discipline, sila, appears in the text with several overlapping meanings, all connected with right conduct. So I'm not going to go into that because that's another piece that's just so dense that I've read it several times and I still can't quite. It's not that I don't understand it, but it's hard for me to absorb it all in my little brain. So, so sila as moral conduct, or moral discipline, or right conduct. So the sila aspects of the Eightfold Path are right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And right action refers to the five precepts. So that's prelude. And one of the things when I'm teaching live, and I'm teaching the Eightfold Path, one of the things I will do is get a whiteboard and put the Eightfold Path, and then put each of the links off the Eightfold Path. For instance, right mindfulness, there are the four foundations of mindfulness. Right action, there are the five precepts. Right intention, there are the three forms of intention. So you get this nice kind of tree effect, or grid, or, well, not grid, but anyway, sort of a graphic depiction of how it evolves, deepens. So in any case, I just want to read a very short section of this. Though the principles laid down in this section of the Eightfold Path restrain immoral actions and promote good conduct, their ultimate purpose is not so much ethical as spiritual. They are not prescribed merely as guides to action, but primarily as aids to mental purification. As a necessary measure for human well-being, ethics has its own justification in the Buddha's teaching, and its importance cannot be underrated. But in the special context of the Noble Eightfold Path, ethical principles are subordinate to the path's governing goal, final deliverance from suffering. So, what he's saying, if that's not completely clear, is that there are essentially two, he's characterizing kind of two layers of purpose behind moral conduct or ethical conduct. The one is the straightforward kind of karmic cause and effect, what it does in your life and in your relationships, and you know, all the ways it impacts, you know, ordinary life. Secondly, though, and what he's characterizing as more important, well, at least within the Noble Eightfold Path, is the spiritual element of it, what he's calling mental purification. So the idea is that the purpose of the Eightfold Path is to attain enlightenment, you know, spiritual awakening, and that, whatever that is. But we'll just use that language. And so every element of the Eightfold Path is about that. They may have other roles in the world, like mindfulness is part of the Eightfold Path is about becoming enlightened, but mindfulness has other benefits, right? So the same applies with the precepts, that they have a practical purpose and impact, but they have a spiritual impact. And the spiritual impact being that in order to have any kind of spiritual awakening, if our behavior is unskillful, our mind is also clouded. Our mind is you know, going to be wrapped up in guilt or anger or greed, which are all sort of implied, lust, intoxication, all those things that the precepts are kind of going against. There was something else in here. I don't know if I can find it now. I'm going to look for it later, because and this might be like another talk next week, because this Friday I'm going to cover the nine steps into September. But what I wanted to talk about in terms of recovery now is, because as I thought about that, this morning, I realized we could think about the 12 steps in a very similar way. That step one is the very practical aspect of recovery. And of course, all the steps can be seen as very practical in that regard, just about, but step one points to this practical element of it, which is I need to deal with my addiction, right? And that's the ostensive purpose of sobriety, of recovery, is to get over your addiction, right? But if we look at step 12, we see that there's another higher purpose in recovery, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. So we can see that the steps also operate in this way, that they have a moral purpose and underpinning, but that they also have this mental purification, as Bhikkhu Bodhi calls it. There's this spiritual awakening that's happening. And I would argue that unless both of these are fulfilled, we're not really in recovery. We have not recovered unless we are at least pursuing both of these. And as with the precepts, there needs to be a bottom line in order to have the mental purification, to have the spiritual awakening. There needs to be this bottom line of behavior. So if we relapse, it's not as though, oh, well, I can just keep doing the spiritual part and, I'll get it together whenever I get it together. No, it really undermines the whole spiritual element of it, the relapse. So I think this is an interesting way to think of recovery. And I think it's one of the arguments for blending Buddhism with the 12 steps, because Buddhism and the Eightfold Path are explicitly about spiritual awakening. And they give us very effective, very powerful, very clear, very practical tools for that purpose. So let's start to go through the precepts. They can be fairly simply stated, and they are usually put forth as trainings rather than commandments. They're not related to the idea of sin. They're really about cause and effect. This behavior brings about this result. If I cease that behavior, this brings about a different result. So the training to refrain from killing any living beings. There's the training to refrain from taking that which is not given, no stealing. The training to refrain from sexual misconduct. The training to refrain from false and harmful speech. And the training to refrain from the use of intoxicants that cause heedlessness. Now, the karmic kind of level of this, the functional level of this, is the restraint, or what we call abandoning, right? It's the non-behavior, right? But then the spiritual awakening side then is the positive manifestation of that attitude, of that where that precept is pointing, and it's something that the positive side of this is something I've reflected on in various ways over the years, and I kind of was thinking of them today in some slightly different ways. But maybe before I go into that, and as I say, I think this this will probably take another class at least to get through. Let's talk about each of these precepts in their direct teaching. To refrain from killing living beings, first of all, is an expansion from the Judeo-Christian commandments, which are, well, have always been understood to just be about human beings. Although, I mean, the way I was taught is thou shalt not kill. It didn't say thou shalt not kill humans, but that was sort of the implication. And this idea of not harming any beings is really central to the Buddhist teachings. There's one of the stories in the suttas is of him watching a field being plowed and thinking about all the living beings that are being killed as the field is being plowed. And it's very touching, that there's this sensitivity that the Buddha has, where he's really tuning in beyond just the human realm or the obvious animal realm. But this then has these broader implications of being many Buddhists take this to be a reason for being opposed to war, to being opposed to the death penalty, and then issues like abortion become brought into the conversation, which can be very uncomfortable, particularly because most American and Western Buddhists are more progressive and tend to be more on the side of so-called choice rather than so-called what do they call it? Life, pro-life. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not going to open that one too wide, but just to say that these are questions that come up, and the invitation in Buddhism, certainly in the way engaged Buddhists view it, is that the precepts should be explored with their broadest possible understanding, and that we should investigate them for ourselves. And it's not that we're going to look to some authority to tell us what is right or wrong, but that we are all going to tune in. So I will say that the spiritual side of this, then, to me, is compassion. If the precept is to not kill, then the spiritual manifestation of not killing is compassion, is caring for beings. And that I think is an even better guide than the precept is just don't kill anything, because we can't actually not kill anything. It's just sort of inevitable. If you get in your car and drive at any speed, you're killing bugs, and there's microbes in our mouth, I guess. I'm not much into biology, but I understand. Wes Nisker talks about this, that your mouth has got all these living things in it, so I'm going to drink some. Presumably I just swallowed and killed some living beings. So, and there are stories of, I think that in Jainism particularly, that they would filter their water to try to keep out all the smallest microorganisms. But again, this kind of focus on the particulars in a way misses the spiritual point, which is to have compassion, to care for beings. That's where we're really challenged, because what is it that triggers us to kill things is anger, right? Is hatred. And the antidote to that isn't having a rule that says don't kill things. The antidote to that is to cultivate compassion and love for beings. So this is the real spirit of the precept. So the second precept, it's hard for me to even move on from the first precept, but because there's a lot to say about it, but I will. The second precept, to not steal, to not take that which is not given. Again, has very basic uh, purpose, and certainly these precepts we can see also as having a social purpose. In order to have civilization, in order for people to live together in large groups, there need to be these agreements, or there's just things get turn into chaos. Uh, so that's the very basic practical level for precepts, right? Uh, but on the on the spiritual level, the what it's talking about is freely giving, of being generous. The opposite, we could say, of stealing is to give away. And as with compassion, we can see that this is not just an action, but it is a mind state. It's the state of kindness, of generosity, of openness, of giving. And we can see how that, where it might not be as obvious how stealing something pollutes your mind. Generosity, it's very clear how it really brightens the mind. And the same, clearly the same with compassion. So again, going back to Bhikkhu Bodhi, thinking of these as mental purification, that we're really laying the groundwork for our spiritual awakening, or maybe even it's not the groundwork, it is the spiritual awakening, is the generosity. On the social level and on the engaged Buddhist level, this precept is taken more broadly to refer to consumption and over-consuming. And this ties in, of course, with the Buddhist idea of renunciation, of letting go, and then it has these again layers of meaning, because when we live more simply, when we're less involved in consumption, then internally there's less greed is being developed. But on the outer level, then we're contributing to society. We're helping society by not taking more than we need. The truth is that those of you who are in America, and I don't know if we have any people from outside the States, but really Westerners in general, our Western developed countries, virtually all of us take more than we need. And the implications of that on a worldwide level are very broad and deep, and we are constantly seeing the implications of that when we see the poverty in less developed countries. And so again, we can see that the precept operates on this personal level, but it also operates on a social level. And with engaged Buddhism, there is a wish to actually transform society, so that the society itself is oriented towards more generosity, towards more equality. And we can see, of course, that then steps into the area of potentially of political realm. And a lot of people are very uncomfortable with that, especially when there's a sense of, I want to kind of have my spiritual life be personal, and I don't want it, that thinking about those things disturbs my mind, and so that makes me feel less spiritual, and so people will complain about Dharma teachers bringing sort of climate change or racial justice or consumerism into the meditation hall, kind of saying, well, I didn't come here for that. And fair enough. Maybe people didn't come here for that. I think a teacher has a responsibility to you know, express what they view as the most important things to be understood. But that's sort of not meant to be coercive in any way, but really just to open up our thinking. You know, Dharma practice operates on these different levels, right? It operates very much on this personal level of self-reflection and meditation. And then it operates on the level of study and exploration. And the suggestion, and really one of the guiding principles, is this openness to learning and to being challenged. You know, just as with the 12 steps, we are really, we're forced, frankly, you know, to really look at things that we don't want to look at, because we see that ultimately, if we want to recover from our addiction, have a spiritual awakening, we must go through this, look at these tough things, our own shortcomings, our own failings. We must make amends. We must, you know, both internally and externally, we have to do this inner work of looking at ourselves in ways we don't want to. And then we need to heal in our relationships with others in ways that can be very difficult and challenging. So I would argue that, you know, Buddhism sort of is saying that we need to do this work as well on a social level. And frankly, you know, this summer, and with the murder of George Floyd and everything that came out of that, it pushed me to engage in a way that I'd somewhat avoided. You know, I had, you know, been delving into racial justice issues for some time, and I have been having my own evolution. But I came to a certain point where I thought, I really want to understand this. And virtually all I've been reading for the last 3 months has been history and theory around these issues. And it is extremely painful at times to see the history of my country, you know, of which I am a part, you know, and something that I believed in, and to see that. And I know this sounds like maybe I'm just, you know, I don't know, is this related to what I'm talking about? Well, I think it is, because the first precept, besides saying do not kill beings, it's really saying do not harm beings. And our country was founded on harming Africans, you know, and all of the implications of that. And so it all, you know, if we really want to grow spiritually, we also have to grow in all these ways. You know, it's not enough to just like deal with my stuff. You know, my stuff isn't separate from your stuff, and your stuff and our stuff isn't separate from the world's stuff, and all of that. And it's not, as I say, you know, like a fourth step is never comfortable. I don't know anybody who said, "Oh, this is so great. I'm just loving writing this fourth step," you know. But you know what I'm talking about is a fourth step of our country. You know, that I think our country is doing a fourth step right now. You know, I was in the bookstore the other day. Another middle-aged white woman came in and said, "Oh, I ordered White Fragility," you know. And I was like, this book, you know, White Fragility and How to Be an Anti-Racist. And these books are, I think, transforming that. I think there's a big fourth step going on in our country. And as with any fourth step, there's a rebellion on one side. If we think of our country as being one being, part of us is rebelling and hating it and getting angry and fighting back. And part of us is, excited and learning. And it's a beautiful mess. Well, for those who have been with me the last couple of months, a lot of my talks have kind of wound up in this place. So I hope it doesn't become tedious. But I think before that, the next precept is about sexual misconduct, and I think we can definitely. We don't want to limit ourselves to just a couple minutes to talk about that. So I want to open it up right now for any thoughts or questions. Cameron, I see you've got your hand up. That's very professional of you. Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi.
Hi. Hey, yeah. Great, lovely teaching. Thank you, Kevin. I just was going to speak out about concerns I have about practicing Buddhism. And kind of, it definitely has to do with what we were talking about with the hindrances and doubt. And also Buddhism in the West. And there are some subtle race issues that I feel personally when I get excited about Buddhism, and I'm enchanted by the exotic, cultural, the Asian culture, the Asian peoples who we draw on for this Western Buddhism that we're seeing. And so I'm just aware of sometimes that exoticizing the other and appropriating the other and their culture is racist. So I'm aware of that. And then also spiritual bypass. So I doubt. I find myself doubting myself around that. Am I doing this, or am I just, do I just have stars in my eyes, or things like that? So I'm wondering if you can give me some of your ideas on Buddhism in the West. And I know there's some things that are written about that, and I haven't read that, but what do you see happening, and how is that taking shape as a distinct branch of Buddhism that we can call our own, that isn't appropriating stuff? Just that.
Yeah. Well, it's a big question, Cam, and I can't answer it briefly. But I think asking the question itself is the most important thing. Keeping the question in mind that what are we doing, basically? And that's definitely a debate across the board in the Buddhist circles. What is this that we're calling Buddhism? And we were talking before about the mindfulness teacher training. Well, that's supposed to be secular, and yet it's not. We're not able to really keep it strictly in secular terms because we lose too much. So there isn't a simple answer. What I think we have to be, I think you were pointing to things that we have to be careful about. First of all, even calling what we're doing Buddhism, and I have tried and I have evolved towards being more interested in traditional. Well, I guess I've evolved in two different ways. I've gotten more into the early teachings, the suttas and all that. But at the same time, as you know from everything I'm doing, I'm very interested in integrating it with this Western practice called the 12 steps, And so what I think is the most we can do is try to be transparent about what we are doing, you know, and be transparent about what we understand that we are doing, you know, because maybe I don't even know what I'm doing, you know, exactly. Is it appropriating? I I'm not a fan of that idea. Being a musician, you know, music is all about building on things that you've heard before. So, and you know, knowledge is all about building on things. You know, the way they talk about standing on the shoulders of the people that came before. So, I, I think appropriating would be if there wasn't any acknowledgement of where we got what we're teaching, you know, and if we pretended it was something that we made up, I, I'm not really sure, but I appreciate the question, and as I say, I can't, I don't think I can go much further with it in this time frame, but yeah, thanks. Anne.
Good morning.
Morning.
That was very moving. I've never heard the precepts talked about this way. So I just was really touched. And one of the things I really benefit from on going on a retreat is noticing my connection with nature more closely. I get really in tune with the smallest of bugs. And so when that I normally would push away or whatever, or kill because it was bothering my whatever. Yeah. You know, ants or Anyway, still working with that. So the story with the Buddha, I mean, I can really understand him getting just reflecting on the microbes in the soil because that's all. And you know what you say is not tedious. I just want
to yeah, well,
affirm that.
Yeah, I was thinking it was more like the worms rather than the microbes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like
whatever, and the potato bugs and
yeah, exactly, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Bigger ones.
Yeah, yeah. There was a little bug in my sink this morning, and I get kind of like, oh, dude, really? What? Why? So I just like kind of swept him out, and then he like disappeared, and I'm like, where did he go? Oh shit! Is there some kind of like crack in there? And I'm like, but just anyway. Let it be. Yeah.
Yeah. No, this practice. I take spiders out for many years now because of this practice, and I am mom. I deal with bats, spiders. Give it to mom because my husband.
Bats? Did you say?
Bats can't. Yeah, bats fly in the house.
Oh, jeez.
And I have to get the net.
I was on retreat some years ago, and Jack Cornfield was sitting the retreat. He wasn't teaching; he was sitting it. And during the walking periods, we were down in the basement at Spirit Rock, and apparently some wasps had gotten in, and he would spend every walking period going over with a cup and covering up a wasp, and then taking them outside one by one. So that I was like, okay, that guy's, he's, what do they say? Walking the walk, walking the talk.
Yeah.
Lonnie, hi. Did I know you were from Louisville? Wow.
Yeah. How are you?
How am I? I'm fine. Thank you.
Good. But here's my question, though.
Yes.
Second question. Okay. On page 109.
Oh, where are we now? What?
One breath at a time, page 109, under the precept inventory.
Okay.
This is under refrain from killing all living beings. You say, but the intention is to bring awareness and kindness into our relations with everyone and everything around us. Okay? Then over in A Burning Desire, I'm sorry I'm doing this, page 122, this fits together. So you might say that it's not that he has perfected his mind, but that he's perfected his reaction reaction to his mind. That blew me away. And I think we can
Where is
say
that? What is that? What page?
122,
Okay.
Learn Desire, the very last two sentences.
122. In the Buddhist story, we don't hear about him having enlightened. He is the embodiment of all that agitates. What is this about, anyway? A higher power of presence.
I think you should write a whole book on that.
Yeah, thanks. It's not that he has perfected his mind, it's that he has perfected his reaction to his mind. Oh, yeah, that is pretty good. Yeah. Well, right. And that, I mean, that really points to what we try to teach people in meditation, right? And this is the key thing, right? In just trying to deal with meditating, which is thoughts come. We can't stop them from showing up. And when you're first learning to meditate, you think, God, I got to get rid of these thoughts. And then you get frustrated about the thoughts, right? So you're reacting to your mind. You're reacting to the thoughts. And then you're making more trouble for yourself. After a while, you learn how to not be bothered by the things that show up in your mind. And then you're just able to sit and it's like, yeah, okay, hi, thanks for sharing. And they come and they go. And you realize, oh, meditating isn't stopping my thoughts. It's changing my relationship to my thoughts. So, yeah.
Is it okay to apply that to everything? You know, like they say in AA, you're not responsible for your first thought. You're responsible for your second thought and your first action.
Yeah. You know, I don't like to give global instructions because there might be an exception. So, but it sounds good, potentially.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So we've run over, and now I'm not going to kick anybody out here.